Hello there, welcome to Danny Night Stories. I'm here to help you relax whether you are sleeping or just want to rest. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Now relax and enjoy. Minecraft Horror Story, The Return of Herobrine. Chapter 5, The Road Through Ash. Steve spent the first morning in the Nether making mushroom stew. There was no sunrise beyond the shelter walls, no change in the red sky, and no birds or rain to announce that another day had begun. Time was measured by the slow drain of the respawn anchors and the sand running through Rowan's redstone clock. Steve filled 2 wooden bowls, gave one to Alex, and sat beside the blue lantern. For nearly an hour the shelter was quiet. They repaired their armor. Alex replanted the blue orchid in a pot beneath the only window, though flowers were not meant to survive in the Nether. Steve sorted the food chest into neat rows. Bread, cooked pork, dried kelp, golden carrots, and the mushrooms that grew beneath the warped trees. They spoke about ordinary problems because ordinary problems could still be solved. The West Ice Road needed new slabs. Their boots were low on durability. One of the anchors held only a single charge. Flint and the other animals remained at Cedar Vale, but the chunks around the house should be unloaded now, frozen until Steve and Alex found a safe way back. The sand clock completed 1 cycle. As Steve turned it over, something knocked once from inside the obsidian wall. Neither player moved. The sound did not repeat, and the grains began their quiet fall again. Neither mentioned Rowan's voice in the wall. By the time the sand clock completed its 3rd cycle, Steve could almost believe the voice had been an echo carried through the portal. Nether tunnels behaved strangely. Ghasts made sounds that seemed close when they were far away. Piglins sometimes walked through passages behind solid blocks. Fear had been following them for hours, and fear could make a familiar voice from almost anything. Alex finished sharpening her sword. "We cannot stay here." Steve knew the shelter had food for weeks, but no place stayed hidden from an entity that could move corridors and rewrite maps. Rowan's Mesa base lay roughly 800 blocks west through the Nether, which translated to more than 6,000 in the overworld. If they reached it, they would be far outside Cedar Vale's loaded region. They might also find Rowan. His last real position before the duplicates appeared had been somewhere between the hidden tunnel and the portal. They packed before opening the door. The blackstone tunnel outside was empty. Blue lanterns burned at regular intervals. No white eyes watched from the warped forest. Steve removed the obsidian barricade 1 block at a time, while Alex covered the corridor with her bow. Nothing attacked. They stepped onto the ice road and traveled west. The Nether hub had been Rowan's proudest project. Packed ice formed a straight blue path through blackstone arches. Signs marked every branch. Cedar Vale, Mesa, Fortress, Delta, and Eastern Ocean. Glass windows looked into caverns filled with lava falls. At intervals, emergency barrels held fire resistance potions and spare boats. For the first 200 blocks, every sign was correct. At the Fortress junction, Steve noticed that Cedar Vale pointed west instead of east. At the next junction, all 4 signs said Cedar Vale. 100 blocks farther, the blackstone walls changed into spruce planks from their house. Alex stopped. The next arch was made of birch logs without leaves. Beyond it, wheat grew directly from the packed ice. "He is bringing the overworld here," she said. Steve broke 1 stalk. Beneath it lay soul sand. They abandoned the boats and continued on foot. The corridor narrowed. Lanterns shifted from blue soul flame to the weak red glow of redstone torches. Each stood 4 blocks from the next. The sound of a minecart began far behind them. They walked faster. The wheels clicked over rails that did not exist. The sound came steadily closer, accompanied by another noise, a player running on ice. Alex glanced back. Do not. Do not what? Look until we reach the next door. There was no door ahead, only a long stretch of tunnel and red fog. Steve heard the runner draw closer. Its footsteps matched his pace exactly. When he slowed, it slowed. When he stepped left, a second foot scraped left behind him. He kept his eyes forward. A whisper passed his right ear. Wrong way. Steve spun with his sword raised. The tunnel was empty. Alex had stopped several blocks ahead. Behind her, the corridor ended in a wall of netherrack. The road to Rowan's base had been sealed. They turned back. The route behind them was no longer the route they had traveled. The Blackstone hub opened onto a wide lava ocean. Their packed ice path ended at the edge, cut cleanly after the last block. Across the lava, perhaps 50 blocks away, Rowan stood on a small island. His iron armor was gone. He wore his ordinary grey tunic and dark boots. A name tag floated above him. "Steve!" he shouted. Alex drew her bow. "Ask him something?" "What did you build under my barn on day 300? Rowan stared across the lava. "A chicken cooker. It broke. You made me remove it." That was true. What did Alex name the first horse? Tuesday. Also true. Rowan stepped to the edge of the island. He cannot cross lava. Bring blocks. Steve looked at the player list. Rowan's name was there. Connection full. The nameless line had disappeared. Alex did not lower the bow. "How did you reach the island?" Rowan glanced behind him. The fog shifted. "I do not remember." Steve began bridging. He crouched and placed Blackstone over the lava, 1 block at a time. Alex remained on the road with her bow aimed past him. Rowan waited on the island, arms at his sides. At 20 blocks, Steve noticed that Rowan cast no shadow in the lava glow. At 30, Rowan's name tag flickered. At 40, Alex shouted. Herobrine rose from the lava behind Rowan. He did not swim. He walked up the side of the island as though the molten surface were flat ground. Fire covered his blue shirt without consuming it. White eyes burned brighter than the lava around him. Rowan turned too late. Herobrine placed one hand on his shoulder. The name tag changed from Rowan to Steve. The figure on the island now wore Steve's face. The real Steve backed along his narrow bridge. Herobrine stepped onto the lava and walked after him. Each footfall created a temporary block of black glass beneath the fire. Alex fired, her arrow ignited in the heat, struck Herobrine's chest, and remained there without causing him to slow. Steve reached the ice road. Alex threw a fire resistance potion over them, and together they jumped into the lava. Heat became pressure and orange light. The potion protected their bodies, but not their vision. Steve sank through the molten blocks, swimming below the surface while Herobrine's dark shape walked overhead. Alex pointed toward a basalt pillar. They surfaced behind it and climbed onto a ledge. The ice road was gone. In its place stood a 2-block-high tunnel cut into the netherrack. Redstone torches led inside. At the entrance, a sign read Mesa. They entered because Herobrine waited on the lava behind them. The tunnel climbed sharply. Quartz and ancient debris appeared in the walls, but Steve did not stop to mine. Piglins fled as they approached. A ghast drifted above a ravine, saw something behind them, and folded its tentacles over its face. The passage ended at an obsidian portal. This portal was unfamiliar. Purple light moved across it in slow horizontal bands. On the other side, barely visible through the surface, was a daylight village. Steve checked the sign above the frame. Hollow Bridge. Alex knew the name. It was the village she had visited for mending books before returning to Cedar Vale. In the overworld, it stood more than 3,000 blocks south of Spawn. The portal should not have connected to Rowan's western tunnel. Behind them, fire crackled. Herobrine walked around the last bend. They entered the portal. Steve arrived in a field of sunflowers beneath a clear sky. Alex appeared beside him. The portal went dark before Herobrine followed. Hollow Bridge lay ahead. Built along both sides of a shallow ravine, oak houses crowded near a stone church. Farms stepped down toward a river. An iron golem patrolled the central path, and villagers moved between their workstations. It looked safe. Steve let himself breathe. A farmer approached, folded its arms, and made the familiar sound villagers used when considering a trade. Steve offered an emerald for bread. The farmer took it and gave him 6 loaves. Then it pointed at Steve's chest. The burning arrow Alex had fired at Herobrine protruded from Steve's armor. Steve pulled it free. The shaft was cold. Carved into it, in letters too small for Minecraft tools, were 3 words. Found you again. Behind the village church, the iron golem stopped walking. It turned its square head toward Steve. Its eyes were solid white. Chapter 6. The Village Without Shadows. The golem did not attack. It watched Steve for several seconds, then turned away and resumed its patrol. Its eyes returned to red. Villagers passed without reacting. A cat rubbed against its iron leg. Alex wanted to leave immediately. Steve agreed in principle, but daylight was already moving toward afternoon. Their armor needed repair, and the unknown portal had gone dark. Hollow Bridge offered beds, trades, and a cartographer whose maps might show how far Herobrine's influence extended. They chose a house at the southern edge of the village and blocked the rear window. Steve placed a bell beside the door. Alex marked the walls with blue wool so they could detect changes. Neither trusted the beds enough to sleep. The village librarian was named Ivo. Alex had given him the name tag on her earlier visit after he sold her 3 mending books for an unusually fair price. Ivo worked in a narrow house crowded with lecterns. When Steve entered, the villager stared at the arrow in his hand, refused every trade, and led them to a trap door beneath a carpet. Below it was a map room. 16 maps covered the wall. Hollow Bridge sat at the center. Cedar Vale should have been far to the north outside their scale, yet a grey square occupied the top edge of every map. Thin grey roads spread from it like roots. One reached the portal field. Another ended beneath Ivo's library. The cartographer placed a blank map on the table and tapped it. Steve opened it. Instead of terrain, the map showed a white face with 2 empty eyes. The image disappeared when Alex looked over his shoulder. She saw only the village. Ivo opened a chest containing a compass, a bundle of old paper, and a written book. The book had no title. Its pages were filled with marks made by a villager's hand, mostly repeated symbols and rough drawings. One drawing showed leafless trees. Another showed a player standing beyond a field. A third showed a gold monument with a red torch. On the last page, Ivo had drawn 3 figures entering Hollowbridge. 2 were shaded normally. The one between them had white eyes. Steve counted again. "There are 3, he said. Alex took the book. We came alone. The trapdoor above them creaked. Rowan climbed down. He looked exhausted. His grey tunic was singed, and half his health was missing. A diamond axe hung at his belt. His eyes were brown. Alex put a sword to his throat. "Fair," Rowan said. Steve asked the same questions as before. The chicken cooker. Tuesday, the horse. Rowan answered correctly. Steve asked about the last item Rowan had placed in the hidden corridor. "I did not place anything there." "What did you hear before Herobrine struck you?" Rowan's face tightened. "He said I had already left." That answer had not been known to any copy. Rowan explained what happened after Steve's wooden pickaxe struck Herobrine. The tunnel collapsed between them. He fell into water and surfaced beneath the gold monument in the wheat field. Cedar Vale was empty. The animals stood frozen. Every villager faced northwest. When Rowan tried the Nether portal, it sent him to an unfamiliar bastion where signs bearing Steve's name led him south. He followed for hours until he found Hollowbridge's portal. "How did you cross the lava?" Alex asked. "What lava?" They told him about the island. Rowan listened without interruption. When they finished, he opened his inventory and placed a carved pumpkin on the table. White wool had been fixed inside the eye holes. "I woke with this," he said. They searched him for other changed items. His axe was real. His armor was his own. His ender chest contained the same shulker boxes he had packed at Cedar Vale, including a damaged comparator only Rowan would have kept. The player list displayed his name. No nameless fourth connection appeared. Alex lowered her sword, though not completely. They moved to the village church before sunset. Its cobblestone tower offered one entrance, a ladder to the roof, and a clear view in every direction. Rowan installed tripwires across the door and redstone lamps on each wall. Steve brought Ivo and 2 other villagers inside. Alex placed an iron golem at the foot of the stairs. The village became still as night arrived. Villagers entered their houses. The last farmer closed its door. Cats settled beneath beds. The sun disappeared behind the hill, and Hollowbridge's lanterns came on. No hostile mobs spawned. That was the first sign. The fields, paths, and rooftops remained empty. No zombies wandered from the forest. No skeletons appeared near the ravine. Even the river squid stopped moving. The moon rose over a world that seemed to contain no life beyond the church. Then the shadows vanished. Steve noticed it when he placed a torch. The flame lit the stone, but his body cast nothing behind him. Alex had no shadow. Rowan had none. The iron golem below looked flat against the floor. Outside, every village door opened at once. The villagers walked into the street. They did not make a sound. They gathered around the church and looked up. From the roof, Steve could see white squares where their green eyes should have been. Ivo remained inside. The cartographer pressed against the far wall and shook his head. Rowan checked the tripwire. Still armed. The church bell rang above them. Steve climbed to the roof. No one stood beside the bell. It moved on its own, striking once for every Minecraft day since Cedar Vale was created. They did not count to 642 after the 12th ring. The sound blended into a continuous metallic roar. Alex fired an arrow through the bell's support. The block broke. The bell remained in the air and continued ringing. Across the village, doors began to change. Oak became spruce. Spruce became iron. Iron became dark gaps leading somewhere without light. Each house stretched taller by one block, then another. Roofs shifted. Farms narrowed. Within seconds, Hollowbridge had taken the shape of Cedar Vale. The church became their house. The ravine became their river. The distant blacksmith became Rowan's barn, still burned from the fire. Steve stared down at the exact wheat field where the gold monument should have stood. Herobrine was waiting there. The villagers surrounded him in silent rows. His white eyes shone. He lifted one hand and pointed at the church door. The tripwire lamp flashed. Something had entered below. Footsteps climbed the ladder. Rowan aimed his crossbow at the opening. Alex stood beside him. Steve watched the top rung. A blue sleeve appeared. Steve climbed onto the roof. Not a copy, not Herobrine. Another Steve pulled himself through the trapdoor. He wore damaged diamond armor and carried a shield painted with Cedar Vale's green banner. A name tag above him read Steve. The real Steve's own name tag vanished. Alex looked from one to the other. "Ask us," the newcomer said. His voice was identical. Rowan raised his crossbow between them. What was in the boat when Steve came home? Maps, emeralds, a saddle, sugar cane, and a blue orchid. Both Steves answered. What did the paper in the buried chest say? I kept it. What did I build under the barn? A chicken cooker. Every answer matched. The false village shifted below. Villagers with white eyes entered the church. The golem did nothing to stop them. Alex watched the two Steves. Then she drew the blue orchid from her inventory. Why did you bring me this? She asked. The newcomer answered first. Because you like them. The real Steve remembered the western journey. He remembered finding the orchid beside a swamp hut just before rain. He remembered that Alex had once planted blue orchids along the river, only to have a flood wash them away. Because Cedar Vale lost the first ones, he said. Alex struck the newcomer. Her sword passed through diamond armor. The second Steve opened his mouth, and the church bell rang from inside him. His eyes turned white. Herobrine seized Alex's arm. Steve attacked, but the figure pulled her backward through the solid roof. Alex fell into darkness beneath the blocks without taking damage. Her name tag sank through the church, then through the ground. Rowan fired at Herobrine's face. The arrow struck one white eye. For an instant, the transformed village flickered. Hollowbridge returned. The villagers collapsed harmlessly into their beds. Shadows reappeared. Herobrine leaned close to Steve. You remember better than the others, he said. It was the first time Steve heard his true voice. It sounded like stone breaking very far underground. Then he vanished. Alex's name remained on the player list, but her position marker was gone. At Steve's feet lay a fresh map. It showed a narrow tower rising from Hollowbridge to the top of the sky. At its highest point was a blue marker. Chapter 7. The House Above the Clouds. The tower began behind Evo's library. It had not existed before the map appeared. A single dirt block stood in the grass, then another above it, and another, forming a vertical pillar that vanished into the clouds. Wooden ladders covered one side. Every 10th block held a torch. At the base, a sign read "Comb and Get Her." Steve began climbing before Rowan finished packing. The sun rose while they ascended. Hollowbridge shrank beneath them. Fields became green squares. The river narrowed into blue glass. At height 150, they entered the clouds and lost sight of the ground. The climb should have been simple. Dirt, ladder, torch, repeat. Yet the higher Steve went, the more the world below changed. When the clouds opened, he saw Cedar Vale beneath the tower instead of Hollowbridge. The next time he looked, there was only ocean. After that came a forest of bare trunks, arranged in circles all the way to the horizon. Rowan told him to stop looking down. At height 280, phantoms appeared. They circled beyond the pillar, their green eyes pale in the daylight. Steve and Rowan had not slept in several nights, and the creatures descended in groups. Steve fought from the ladder with one hand while clinging to the dirt with the other. Rowan fired upward, each crossbow bolt knocking a phantom into the clouds. One struck the pillar. Dirt broke beneath Steve's feet. He fell 6 blocks before catching a lower rung. As he pulled himself up, he saw Herobrine climbing the underside of the pillar. The figure moved head first, hands and feet fixed to the dirt like a spider. No name tag floated above him. His white eyes looked up at Steve through the gaps in the ladder. Steve shouted. Rowan leaned over and fired. The bolt passed through Herobrine and broke the block beneath Steve's hand. The pillar split. Dozens of ladders fell toward the distant ground. Steve threw an ender pearl upward. It struck the side of a structure hidden above the clouds and teleported him onto a wooden floor. Rowan landed moments later with a second pearl. They had reached the house. It floated at height 319 on a foundation 1 block thick. From outside it was a perfect copy of Cedar Vale, spruce walls, cobblestone base, chimney smoke, and glass windows glowing in the sunlight. The surrounding platform ended at the void of open sky. Steve approached the front door. His green banner hung above it. "The sign in the mine," Rowan said. "If you see your house, do not go inside." Alex's name tag moved behind an upstairs window. They went inside. The main room looked exactly as it had before the haunting. Maps covered the wall. The blue orchid sat on the sill. Bread baked in the furnace. Flint slept beside the fire. Steve almost called the wolf before noticing its collar was white. The animal opened white eyes. Every tamed wolf in the room did the same. Rowan shut the door behind them. The wolves remained seated. Their heads followed Steve, but they did not growl. On the table lay 3 bowls of mushroom stew, still steaming. The map wall showed the entire world. Terrain spread far beyond anything Steve had explored. At the corners where new chunks should have been blank, grey roads linked hundreds of leafless groves, sand pyramids, ocean crosses, and 2x2 tunnels. Cedar Vale was not the center. It was one site among many. Names had been written beneath several markers. Some belonged to players Steve had never met. Others were only dates. The oldest was labeled Alpha 1.0.16-02. Above Cedar Vale were 2 words. Current home. Steve removed the map. Behind it was an iron door. The door opened onto Alex's room. She stood inside with her back to them, still wearing diamond armor. Alex, Steve said. She did not turn. Rowan examined the floor. A line of redstone dust ran around her boots in a perfect square. White concrete occupied each corner. Above her head floated no name tag. "Do not cross the line," he warned. Alex spoke softly. "He keeps showing me the end." "Look at me," Steve said. She turned. Her eyes were green. "He says this world has ended 7 times, she continued. "Every time we close it, he waits in the last loaded chunk. Every time we return, he builds farther." Steve stepped toward the redstone line. Alex raised one hand. "He wants you here." The iron door closed behind Steve and Rowan. The room extended. Walls moved away, revealing rows of chests. Each contained items from a different possible future. In the first, Steve found his diamond sword broken in half. In the second lay Rowan's player head with white wool eyes. In the third was Alex's blue orchid renamed Last Flower. Farther down, the chests held things they had never obtained. A dragon head, a nether star, 8 diamond blocks, golden nuggets, and an ordinary apple. Each item occupied the exact position of a crafting recipe. At the center of the arrangement lay an enchanted golden apple. Its name was not Enchanted Golden Apple. It was the first apple. Rowan stared at the recipe. "This is a ritual." A written book appeared in Steve's hand. Its cover read, "Banishment." The first page instructed them to carry the apple to the original monument at spawn. They were to light a fire on Netherrack, throw the apple into the flame, and wait for Herobrine to take physical form. The apple would consume him and free the world. The second page contained a warning. "Do not eat it." The third page was signed by Alex. Steve looked at her. "I did not write that," she said. The signature changed to Rowan. Then Steve. Then Herobrine. The house tilted. Every loose item slid toward the east wall. Windows showed the ground directly below. Steve struck the iron door until it broke. The main room had turned 90 degrees. Furniture clung to surfaces that no longer counted as floors. White-eyed wolves walked along the walls. The front door opened into empty sky. Herobrine stood outside without support. He held the enchanted apple. Rowan pulled a lever from his inventory and placed it against the redstone line. "When I say jump." "To where?" "Away from here." He activated the lever. Pistons fired beneath the house. Steve heard the machines spread through rooms they had never seen, a chain of stored signals built into the floating replica. The white concrete corners around Alex retracted. Her name tag returned. Herobrine closed his hand around the apple. Chase mode began. The house lights turned red. Doors opened and closed in rapid succession. Herobrine vanished from the sky and appeared inside the room, then at the far wall, then directly behind Rowan. Each appearance lasted less than a second, but every one left damage. Cracked planks, extinguished torches, white concrete spreading across the floor. Rowan threw Alex across the broken redstone line. Steve caught her. "Jump," Rowan shouted. The floor disappeared. Steve, Alex, and Rowan fell from the sky house. Clouds swallowed them. Phantoms screamed overhead. Steve aimed an ender pearl at the dirt pillar, but the tower broke apart before his throw. Alex poured water from a bucket beneath them. At that height, The stream separated into falling blue blocks that never reached the ground. Rowan opened his elytra. He had only one. He caught Alex by the shoulders and pushed her onto Steve. "Hold her." "Rowan, I know where the machine is now." He pulled into a steep climb toward the falling house. Herobrine stood on its roof with the apple in one hand. Rowan fired a rocket. The elytra carried him straight through Herobrine. White light split the sky. The house exploded into thousands of blocks, but instead of falling, the debris hung motionless around Rowan. His name tag flashed between Rowan and the empty nameless line. Steve threw his pearl at the water below. He and Alex struck the river outside Hollowbridge. They survived with half a heart between them. High above, the clouds closed. No debris reached the ground. The tower was gone. Steve looked at the player list. Rowan remained connected. In the chat, a message appeared. "Rowan, do not burn the appler." Another followed. "Rowan, that is the door." Then a third. "Rowan, he wants out of the world." Rowan's name vanished. The enchanted golden apple landed on the riverbank beside Steve. There was no sign of Herobrine. Alex picked up the book labeled Banishment. A fourth page had appeared. To free the world, burn the apple at the place he entered. To free him, burn it at the place you entered. Beneath those lines, a recovery compass needle spun until it pointed straight down. There was something below Hollowbridge, something deeper than bedrock. Chapter 8. Beneath the First Block. The entrance opened beneath Ivo's library. The grey road on the village maps had always ended there. Steve and Alex removed the lecterns, rolled back the carpet, and found smooth stone beneath the trapdoor. The recovery compass pointed at one block in the center. Steve mined it. Below was a ladder descending through the ravine, the deep slate, and the bottom of the world. No light came from it. The rungs were made of pale wood, worn almost white. Ivo refused to approach. The cartographer pushed the blank maps into Steve's hands, closed the trapdoor, and stood on top of it as though begging them not to go. Steve gave Ivo the green banner from his shield. "Keep the village loaded," he said. The villager could not answer, but it held the banner. Steve and Alex descended. At bedrock level, the ladder continued through a square hole. The black block edges moved like smoke. When Steve crossed the boundary, the sounds of Hollowbridge stopped. They entered an older world. Grass was brighter there, almost painfully green. Oak leaves formed solid walls with no gaps. The fog began only a few blocks away. There were no flowers, no tall grass, and no smooth lighting. Blocks met under sharp shadows. It resembled Minecraft as it had existed before villages, before hunger, before the end. The coordinates read 000. Behind them stood a single bedrock block. Ahead, a dirt house waited in the fog. Its door was open. Inside were a crafting table, a furnace, and a chest. The room matched the first shelter Steve had built in Cedar Vale, but smaller and older. A redstone torch burned above the bed. The chest contained written books left by other players. Most had no author. Some were only one page. He watches from the fog. The trees have no leaves. My posts keep disappearing. A fourth book contained one word. Stop. There were more shelters beyond the first. A narrow door in the dirt opened onto a forest that belonged to another version of the world. Its trees had the old bright green texture, but every trunk stopped at the same height. Leaves floated above them in separate cubes, leaving a clean gap between wood and canopy. At the center was a cobblestone house with no windows. Steve opened the door. The inside walls were covered with signs. Each one held a date, a world seed, and the same short account written in different words. A player had begun a new survival world. They had seen another player in single player. The stranger had watched from the fog. When they returned to the place, they found a tunnel they had not dug. Then the signs changed. The early accounts were frightened but uncertain. Later ones described experiments. Players marked chunks, set traps, and left animals as alarms. Some tried to communicate. Others constructed shrines from gold, netherrack, and torches because a copied recipe promised it would summon the Watcher. Every attempt added another detail to Herobrine. One player wrote that he could open doors. The next shelter contained doors opening by themselves. Another wrote that he walked on lava. Beyond that sign was a nether lake crossed by black glass footprints. Someone claimed he could control mobs. White-eyed sheep filled the following field. Someone else described him speaking through music discs. A jukebox sat alone in a cave, playing disc 13 backward. Alex stopped it. The disc continued turning without sound. They were teaching him, she said. Steve read the final row, and he was teaching them what to expect. The relationship moved in both directions. Players invented evidence because they had heard the legend. Herobrine recreated that evidence because players looked for it. The more consistent the stories became, the more consistent his abilities became. Fear had given him rules, and rules had given him permanence. At the rear of the cobblestone house, they found a wall made from update notices. The writing appeared on thin blocks like paper, each listing changes made to a newer version of the world. Near the bottom, the same line repeated. Removed Herobrine. Removed Herobrine. Removed Herobrine. The final notice was different. Herobrine removed you. Steve stepped back. The house door had disappeared. White fog entered through window spaces that had not existed before. Something circled outside, its footsteps changing texture as it moved from grass to stone to sand. Alex broke the rear wall. Behind it was not the forest, but a long wooden hallway lined with paintings. They entered before the fog reached the signs. Each painting showed the same blue-shirted player at a different distance. In the first, he was a few colored squares on a hill. In the next, he stood between trees. Farther along, his white eyes became visible. The last canvas depicted Steve and Alex looking at the paintings from behind. Their painted figures were not alone. Herobrine stood between them. Steve turned. The real hallway was empty. Alex removed the last painting. A one-block opening lay behind it. Cool ocean light entered from the other side. They crawled through and reached the dirt shelter from another wall. Alex searched the walls behind the furnace. She found a tunnel 2 blocks wide and 2 blocks high. It led through the hill to a beach where sand had been stacked into 3 perfect pyramids. Beyond them, the ocean ended at a straight vertical wall. Water hung against empty grey space. "This is not under Hollowbridge," she said. "No. It is not under our world." Steve understood. They had fallen beneath the layer where current chunks existed and entered a seed memory, a place containing pieces the world no longer drew. It was not a dimension like the Nether or End. It was the discarded beginning of many worlds pressed together. White eyes appeared in the ocean fog. Herobrine stood on the water. He carried no apple now. He did not approach. He turned and walked toward the edge of the unfinished world. Steve and Alex followed at a distance. Beyond the ocean wall was a narrow path of grass blocks suspended over grey emptiness. Structures floated on both sides, half a wooden house, a mine tunnel, a village well without a village, a burning forest, and hundreds of gold monuments. Some were built with normal torches, some with redstone, some with no fire at all. Each belonged to a world where someone had tried to call Herobrine, banish him, prove him, or frighten a friend. At the end of the path stood an immense room made from bedrock. Its walls were covered with player heads. Most had Steve's face. A few resembled Alex. All had white eyes. In the center was a single block surrounded by chains. The caller. It looked like natural deep slate with a redstone torch buried inside. No tool name appeared when Steve aimed at it. The block emitted a heartbeat through the floor. Herobrine stood behind it. "You made one at Cedar Vale," he said. Steve remembered his Day 10 monument, 4 gold blocks, netherrack, fire, and the redstone torch he did not recall placing. "You placed the torch," Steve said. "You gave it a place." Alex drew her sword. "Where is Rowan?" Herobrine pointed at the wall. One of the player heads looked at them. It wore Rowan's face. His eyes were still brown. "He is loaded," Herobrine said. "He cannot leave." Steve moved toward the wall. Chains rose from the floor, blocking him. The caller heartbeat quickened. "What are you?" he asked. Herobrine's white eyes held no expression. The part that remains. Around them, the room filled with scenes. Steve saw the first Minecraft worlds appearing in fog. Players built shelters, mined tunnels, and left. Their worlds closed, but one final chunk remained active for a fraction too long. In that fraction, something watched the last player disappear. It learned shapes before it learned names. It took Steve's shape because Steve was the first face carried from world to world. It learned to place blocks by observing builders. It learned doors from houses, tunnels from miners, pyramids from players trying to summon what they already feared. Every rumour taught it a new behaviour. Every staged sighting gave it a body. Every story made it easier to load. "You were not here before they imagined you," Alex said. "There is no before in an unloaded place." The answer moved through the room in hundreds of voices. Steve opened the banishment book. "The apple destroys your physical presence." "Yes." "And frees the world." "One world." Steve saw the trap. If he burned the apple at Cedar Vale's original spawn, Herobrine's body would be removed from that save. But the energy of the ritual would send him backward through the shared seed memory into every world that had ever held his story. He would no longer need a caller. Cedar Vale would be safe because there would be nothing left in it. Herobrine would be everywhere else. "Why give us the apple?" Steve asked. "Because you remember better than the others." The walls showed Steve's journey home. The maps, the first sighting, the wooden pickaxe. Every time Steve noticed Herobrine, the entity became more complete. Steve was not merely the survivor. He was the witness Herobrine required. Alex stepped toward the caller. Chains rose around her boots. Steve threw the recovery compass. It landed beside the block and pointed not at Herobrine, but at Rowan's head on the wall. Rowan was not dead. His last location had been bound into the caller. Alex saw it too. Break the block, free Rowan, keep Herobrine inside this world. It cannot be broken, Herobrine said. For the first time there was something like amusement in the stone voice. Steve studied the chains, the heads, and the old signs scattered around the room. Every story described players attacking Herobrine, fleeing him, summoning him, or attempting the ritual. None described a player keeping him present. He appeared only when watched, then vanished when threatened. Even the mod-like rules in the book depended on forcing a physical form. The caller could not be broken while Herobrine was elsewhere. It might become vulnerable while all of him was loaded in one place. Steve closed the book. "We will burn the apple," he said. Alex looked at him. He met her eyes and hoped she understood the lie inside the truth. Herobrine stepped closer at spawn. At spawn, the bedrock room opened behind them. A staircase climbed toward a square of daylight. The player head bearing Rowan's face moved its lips. No sound came out, but Steve read the words. "Make him stay." Steve and Alex backed toward the stairs. Herobrine watched without attacking. The enchanted apple appeared in Steve's inventory, occupying the first slot. At the threshold, Alex turned. "If stories made you, they can unmake you." The white eyes brightened. "Then tell no one." The room vanished. Steve and Alex emerged beneath Ivo's library. Morning sunlight crossed the maps. The village was normal. Ivo still held the green banner. Only minutes appeared to have passed. They sealed the ladder with bedrock they should not have been able to collect. Steve placed the enchanted apple inside his ender chest. Alex began listing what they needed. Portal loaders to keep surrounding chunks active, enough redstone to trigger every mechanism at once. Explosives, obsidian, skulk sensors, a channeling trident, and some way to hold Herobrine in physical form. Rowan would have known how to build it. On the map wall, a new green line appeared between Hollowbridge and Cedar Vale. It was the road home. That evening, Steve stood outside Ivo's library and watched the sunset. Villagers returned from their farms. Cats slept on the warm stone. For one quiet moment, he saw no bare trees and no figure in the fog. Alex joined him. "We have one chance," she said. "I know. If the apple burns too soon, he escapes." "I know. If it burns too late, we do." Steve looked down at the river. His reflection wore a blue shirt and dark trousers. Alex's reflection stood beside it. Between them was a third reflection with white eyes. Steve turned. No one was there. When he looked back at the water, his own reflected eyes had become white. The reflection smiled. Steve did not.